All right, guys, things are heating up when it comes to the game releases. In addition to the Nintendo Switch 2 rumors, leaks, and announcements potentially incoming. And in this video, we're going to break down everything that happened over the last number of days with the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, if you are into Nintendo Switch 2 content, Nintendo RPG content, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell to get the best Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch news on YouTube. Now let's go ahead and jump right into a multitude of topics here, going over what's happening with Nintendo's new platform. Now over on Insider Gaming, Tom Henderson, a guy that I've ran across a few different times over on Twitter and of course his website as well, has talked about the Nintendo Switch 2 and what he expects to see. Now he's broken some industry stuff like the PlayStation Portal, for example, so he's definitely got some ears to the street when it comes to different content. Now, this isn't a major thing, but it's something that I've been hearing quite a bit as well from some people here and there. And Tom Henderson says, quote, "Really excited for the Nintendo Switch 2 and its tech. We'll see launching on Xbox Series X/S, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch 2, and PC, a heck of a lot in 12 to 18 months. Now, this is obviously something that's a very big departure from what Nintendo fans are used to for the last, number of years, decades? A lot of times when it comes to the Wii U, the Nintendo Switch, the DS, 3DS, whatever the case is, the Nintendo version is usually later or different or not at all, and when it does come, there's issues across the board. Now, there's obviously differences in times when it comes to certain things, certain Japanese titles, but a lot of the Western games, and I'm guessing this is what he's talking about, some of the big AAA or Western games or big AAA Japanese games that Nintendo has missed out on at launch or around the time, that is going to be a reversal for the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, what we do know about this tech from the leaks, from the credible sources like Eurogamer and VGC, that the tech is impressive. We know that modern NVIDIA DLSS mobile technology, the Tegra, and what they're using is something that is supremely better than what the Nintendo Switch is. Back in 2015, 2016, Tegra X1 was pretty much what you needed to do if you wanted to have a hybrid system. But while it was still strong for what it was at the time, the technology just wasn't there yet. It was not able to produce what we are getting now at this point, even with technology that NVIDIA has that's a couple years old. But with DLS 3.5 and what they're doing with modern architecture, even if Nintendo goes back a year or so, they're going to have a very competent system, and that is the biggest difference from back then till now. But it goes even further beyond that. It's not just the RAM amount or what they're doing with that. It's also how the system is put together, how they have the SDKs, how they have memory bandwidth, how they put everything together. I think Nintendo has learned a heck of a lot from what they did with the Nintendo Switch, from what developers were wanting, what they need to add, what they need to do. One of the things that we're going to talk about in just a bit was Capcom's involvement in the previous system when it comes to the Switch. So I think that they've learned a bit. Now, don't expect some type of heavyweight PlayStation 5 Lenovo type of thing where it's $700 and has 5 million horsepower teraflops and all that. That's not what's going to be happening here. However, what you are going to get is a very competent system that's going to be powerful, especially in a hybrid format, and that exclusive DLSS technology that's going to be able to push the boundaries on what this system can do. So I'm very excited for that as well, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see how Nintendo navigates this and with their third parties, because yes, I have been hearing myself as well, get ready for a lot more games that we didn't expect to come to Nintendo platforms, or that usually don't come at the launch, announced with everything else, but that actually happening this time around with the Nintendo Switch 2. So we'll see how all that plays out. But speaking of Capcom, like I alluded to, let's get into the next bit of Nintendo Switch 2 news here. And this is talking about the next major Monster Hunter, a massive RPG that sells incredibly well and has benefited all the platforms, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, PC, Monster Hunter is big no matter where it's at. And apparently, we've got someone who has been credible. My man Stealth definitely backs for him when it comes to Felipe over there. He is stating that Monster Hunter 6 or Monster Hunter 7 or the next Monster Hunter game will be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, this is very interesting because this follows up on some of the rumors of games like Far Cry 7 from the same person. And once again, my man Stealth definitely backs for him, as you can see in this tweet right here. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But here's what I'll tell you on this and what I know. Now, back when the Nintendo Switch first came out and people were very upset that Monster Hunter World wasn't coming to the platform. And I'm thinking to myself, people shouldn't be upset because I knew I had a source that stated that there was a Monster Hunter game built specifically for the Switch, but it was going to take a bit of time. Capcom is the same company that got Nintendo to increase the RAM amount so it can handle the RE engine and a couple other things in terms of what Capcom kind of gave them a bit of guidance on. And that was instrumental to getting games like Monster Hunter Rise and more on the platform from Capcom. So Capcom sold 10 million units plus of Monster Hunter Rise on the Nintendo Switch by itself, and they sold millions of copies of the port of Monster Hunter Double Cross or whatever it's called. So Monster Hunter has been one of the biggest third-party AAA Japanese games on Nintendo platforms for years now. Capcom knows, especially looking at those Japanese sales figures where Monster Hunter is still massive, and looking at what happened with Monster Hunter Rise, they better have a portable version of that game out at launch, because, you know, Xbox, it's not really going to do much there. And the shifting dynamics with the PlayStation 5, it's not quite the same as the PlayStation 4 in terms of software sales in Japan. So you can't 100% rely upon PS4 like they did with Monster Hunter World back in 2018 or so. So I absolutely see Capcom making a Switch 2 version of Monster Hunter 6 or the next Monster Hunter game, whatever you want to call it. And I see it doing well across all the platforms, but especially with Nintendo Switch 2 in Japan, that's going to be a huge phenomenon, just like Monster Hunter Rise was across the world, but especially in the US and Japan, Monster Hunter Rise just killed it on the platform. So yes, I expect to see Monster Hunter 6, the next big Monster Hunter, whatever you want to call it, I expect that to be on the Nintendo Switch 2. I expect Capcom was one of the first, if not the first, major AAA third-party developer to get a Nintendo Switch 2 dev kit. And yes, they want all of their games on there. And I don't think it's just going to stop there. And this is just my own speculation on this, but I feel that Capcom will bring over native ports of Resident Evil games, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 8. A lot of these are the cloud versions on the Nintendo Switch. I don't think anybody's buying those, but if you put them out on the Nintendo Switch 2, that's pretty much just printing money because of the tech. When you're going to make games, like, that tech is already done, it's there, they can port that game over probably with not a lot of time and make their money back plus then some. So I see Capcom being a big player on the Nintendo Switch 2 when it comes to games, and I think it's going to be different from what happened with people when it comes to the fans and Capcom with the Nintendo Switch, as people complained and whined, oh, they're just testing the waters, there's nothing big yet. Well, yeah, that's because the Wii U failed. The 3DS wasn't that system in terms of big AAA games, and Capcom, just like many others, were wary if Nintendo would be able to even sell this thing at the launch. Plus, the technology just wasn't really something that was normal or common in terms of development. Now with ARM, now with what they're doing with NVIDIA, it's so much better at this point. A lot of companies would be silly not to support the Nintendo Switch 2. So we're hearing a lot of these rumors. Maybe some of these games don't happen, but I think a lot of them will be happening. Now, we have one more thing when it comes to a major RPG potentially coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, or maybe not, because there was reports about Final Fantasy VII Remake and that potentially being on the Nintendo Switch 2 Well, it doesn't seem that is the case for right now at this point with Square Enix. Now, recently, Nate Drake, who's also Nate the Hate, who also runs his awesome podcast, Nate the Hate Podcast with MVG, talked about something on the family boards recently with Square Enix and Final Fantasy VII Remake. And he's stating that Square Enix isn't really looking to bring it to other platforms right now at this point. Now remember, we did once again get those rumors that Square Enix was testing Final Fantasy VII Remake, or they just got it going on there and it pretty much ran comparable to the PlayStation 5 version of the game, which the PlayStation 5 version, what is it, 1440p, 60 frames per second, something like that. Now, I said multiple times, well, yes, this could happen. Remember, it could just be a test. They could just be testing out things to see how the system performs with what they're doing over at Square Enix, and it doesn't necessarily confirm or make sure it's going to happen that Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming over because of the relationship that Square Enix has with Sony. It's just one of those things that's just true. Square Enix and Sony have this relationship, and even if it's to the detriment of Square Enix when it comes to their big game, Final Fantasy, no longer being a 10 million plus seller, they obviously do not care. At least they have not shown to care about that. So here is what Nate Drake had to say on the FAMI boards about this. Quote, FF7 Remake is not a current plan. Could it happen eventually? Sure. Is it an active plan at this moment? No. A Switch 2 release exists in the same way an Xbox release does. If Square wants to do it, they can and will, but no such plan exists at the present. So right now, whoever his contacts are telling him, nope, we've got nothing when it comes down to it. And it reminds me of Persona 5 Royal and the Persona games. People for years, heck, I got information, maybe there's something there, but it was never really an active thing. Maybe it was a plan, there was a test, there was something in the background. When it comes down to it, they had it written down on paper, but there was nothing active until a number of years ago. Probably 2021 or so, maybe 2020, they started thinking about it. So I do think maybe right now there's nothing. They're focused on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. They're focused on their partnerships with Square Enix. They just got down closing down shop when it comes to Forspoken, and maybe there's other things. They have another game. There's Foam Stars that has a beta that I played, and it's not that great, but there's something there, right? But that's Square Enix with Sony, so they're really focused on their relationship with Sony. Now, obviously, Nintendo has a good relationship with Square Enix. There are plenty of games. There are big titles from Square Enix on Nintendo platforms, and maybe they're cooking up some special stuff for the Switch. Maybe they're cooking up Dragon Quest. Maybe they're cooking up other titles. We're getting an exclusive Dragon Quest game with Dragon Quest Monsters on the Nintendo Switch very soon. So I'm guessing that Square Enix might go in a different direction when it comes to Switch 2 right now at this point, and then maybe later they bring over some of the other titles like a Final Fantasy VII Remake or like a Rebirth in the distant future. Now, Square Enix, I think that they should split the franchise. And I've said this a million times and I'll say it again. I think that there should be a multi-platform, regardless, high-end turn-based Final Fantasy game that has a separate team, and they make that for Nintendo platforms, they make it for Xbox, and they make it for PlayStation, and they make it for PC. I think there should be that. Then there should be the major teams that we see right here making Final Fantasy 14 and updates, making Final Fantasy 7 Remake, Final Fantasy 16, the ones that do that as well. They should have a whole separate team that makes a traditional high-end ATB turn-based Final Fantasy, and then have their big teams that make Final Fantasy 16 or make Final Fantasy Rebirth, 14, and all of that. I think that way you hit all targets. That way you do not leave money on the table. Yes, you're going to be spending a lot more money with that high-end ATB Final Fantasy, but as we've seen with games like Baldur's Gate, Xenoblade Chronicles, and more turn-based titles, heck, their own Final Fantasy game with Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, that's selling 3 million units plus. There is a huge market, multi-million selling market out there for high-end turn-based games. So I do think that would probably be the route that Square Enix should go. Will they go that route? Probably not, but I still think it's something that I will say anytime we talk about Square Enix, Final Fantasy, and the future of the franchise. But those are just my thoughts on everything here. What do you guys think when it comes to all this Nintendo Switch 2 dropped information or leaked information, or whatever you want to call it? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this one here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out some of my other videos right here on screen, like my top 25 Nintendo Switch first party games. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.